The fig tree is going to do what the fig tree wants to do. What drives all of that growth, the root growth and the top growth and all that, is genetics. So it's wintertime and it's time for fig cuttings, and there are a lot of questions flying around about fig cuttings. I've got 2 questions that I want to try and answer for you guys today and try to help you get on the right track for growing these little fig cuttings. Now, this is all from my experience. The fig world is huge. There are many people involved in it, and the people that are involved in it are really particular about what they do, and they really believe in their style, their techniques, and their experience. This is all from my experience, so take it with a grain of salt or sand or something like that. So the first question comes from Sowing for the Future. Hey Mike, huge fan here. Thanks. I have a question for you, but it's totally unrelated to peppers. Thank you, Henry. It's about figs. I am reviving some cuttings in the mail of 3 varieties, but I am wondering how far I can stretch those cuttings. How many nodes do I need for rooting figs? If you have the answer, please let me know. Well, thank you for the question, Sowing for the Future. That's a great question, and a lot of people have it. So fig cuttings are taken as hardwood cuttings through the winter, generally speaking. Probably 95% of people who propagate figs propagate them through the winter as hardwood cuttings. And so that's what this person is talking about. When I take a hardwood cutting, how many nodes, how many little, here's one cutting that we did last summer, and you can see there's a node right there, and you move up, there's another node there, and if you kept going up, there'd be another node and another node. And this person wants to know, can I, now this is already rooted, but if this branch wasn't here and this branch wasn't here, can I just snip this thing right here and just have maybe a 2-inch piece? How many times can we cut this thing up? Isn't that the mystery of the century? So in my experience, I found that when it comes to figs, you can root just about any cutting you put in the soil. In fact, I'm still kind of playing around with something, but I would like to see if I can get a fig to root that doesn't even have a node and see if it will grow its own bud right out of the wood, because these things are so active and so easy to just get growing. I think it might be possible, but I'm not 100% sure on that yet. So to answer your question, yeah, you could cut that thing up as many times as you want and get each individual node section to root and grow a plant. However, having said that, I don't prefer to do that with fig cuttings, and here's why. When it comes to hardwood cuttings, a fatter cutting that is longer and taller and just has more mass, more material, will have more stored up energy, and it will be able to withstand being severed from the parent plant, placed on bottom heat, or however you've got it situated. It'll be able to withstand a longer period of time without its own roots and without its own leaves until it's able to root. A thinner stemmed plant that is shorter won't have that stored energy, and so it's a little more critical. There's a little bit more of a time factor going on there, and you really need to make everything perfect and get that sucker rooting fast so that it doesn't just wither and die back, because it won't have the moisture content, the mass to hold the moisture content. It won't have the nutrient content. It won't have that stored energy to withstand time until it can get its own roots and start absorbing its own nutrients again. So can you do it with smaller, shorter little sections with one node? Absolutely. Yes, it will work. But once you do that and that little guy does root and it starts putting on growth, it's not going to grow as fast. It's not going to turn into a nice, healthy, beautiful little tree. It might be healthy, but it'll be small and take longer to get started. Now this just applies to figs generally. It might apply to some other hardwood cuttings, but these figs grow so fast, and so we expect so much out of them in a short amount of time. Here's what I would do. If you paid good money for these fig cuttings and you've got some nice stout long fig cuttings with 3 or 4 little nodes on them, and they're thicker and they're longer, just stick those things halfway down into some well-draining soil and let them root just like that. If you can't lose that fig cutting, just stick it in soil and go. Don't worry about chopping it up. Your purpose is, you've spent the money, you've gotten to this point, it came in the mail, you're ready to do the cutting. Just get the thing going, get it rooted. Once it grows into a tree, then you can take all the cuttings you want and experiment. But right now, if this is really important to you to get rooted, just get the thing going. Having said all of that, My favorite type of fig cuttings to root are these thicker fig cuttings. The ones that are 3 or 4 nodes, maybe 8 to 12 inches long and fat. I'm talking at least a ½ inch, closer to 3/4 of an inch to an inch. In my experience, they take a little bit longer to root, but once they do root, all that stored energy in there just goes to work rooting like crazy and putting on branches, and these things turn out to be my best little trees to start off with. So I hope that answers your question. Let's move on to another question that I see all the time, and I've got some thoughts on it myself. I don't know if everybody's got the same thoughts, but this is from my own experience. This was a little fig air layer that we did last summer. This is my Ben's Golden Riverside, or who is it? Robert's Golden Rainbow, or I think it's called several different names, but I actually got this tree directly from Ben B, and then last summer I air layered one branch of it, and this is what we got. Now, if you guys watched that video, I did a whole video on it, and I'll put a link in the description below. I got this guy to root, but it didn't have any top growth. So I ended up snipping it off in the early fall, late summer, before things started going dormant, potted it up, I put it in my house on my windowsill, and this is what we've got. It's grown a beautiful little leaf with a little bud right there, and we've got all kinds of little buds swelling along this little cutting here. It's doing real well. You can see right here, we've got a bunch of roots. They've grown out to the side and they're growing like crazy. Remember, this was an air layer, not a cutting. And anyway, it's just been sitting on my windowsill in my kitchen. Not a lot of lighting, not any artificial lighting, a little bit of lighting from a skylight that's kind of off to the side a little bit. But I just wanted to see what it would do. And so the question that I see coming up a lot is, hey, my fig roots are starting to turn brown. And you see that? Let me see if I can get this light better. They're starting to turn brown. There it goes. Just like that. They're not white anymore. They're not just like growing like crazy. See that? Those guys, there's some white roots in there, but they're starting to turn brown and they're slowing down. The other thing that people notice is the top of the plant quits growing. And basically all of this happened. This leaf came out and these roots grew, and that all happened probably a month ago. And then this thing just stopped and it just sat there. And I look at it and it just sits there. So I've got some thoughts about this and what I do about it, and I'd like to address them so that we can all kind of learn together where to go from here. First of all, there's nothing wrong with your fig. It's just fine. Now, other than the fact that I brought it out here in a freezing cold and it's probably not liking me right now, there's nothing wrong with your fig. Figs, in my experience, grow in spurts, kind of like rhododendrons. They put on a whirl of leaves. Like, in fact, rhododendrons in the summertime, or in the spring, they'll send up new shoots, new growth, you know, depending on the size of the plant, maybe 8 inches with a whirl of leaves and a new bud, and then it sits there all summer long and doesn't do any more growing, and then it blooms the next spring. I find the same thing with these figs. They send up their growth based on how much stored energy they have. They do the best they can with what they've got, and then they kind of slow down and they stop. And it takes time. And it's like they're soaking up energy. And the roots just stop actively growing. The top of the plant stops actively growing. And in my opinion, this is the worst time to give it tons of fertilizer because it's not actively growing and it can't absorb and use all that fertilizer. So what do I do in this situation? I don't panic. We don't need instant gratification, right? If you want that, you go get a Domino's pizza. All we do is we just watch it. We don't do anything. We make sure that the soil is just slightly moist. If you have to, water it from the bottom. Don't water too much from the top and just saturate with water. And don't fertilize. You've already probably got a little bit of fertilizer in there from when it was actively growing, and if you don't, it's okay. It's still got stored energy in there. Just wait, watch it and wait, and just see what happens. And when it starts actively growing again, and you see those roots start turning white and growing again, and the soil medium is just lightly moist, but it may need to get watered, then give it some water with fertilizer and see what happens. But not too much, not every other day, not every third or fourth or fifth day even. Let that soil kind of dry a little bit in between. Not completely dry, but let it just let it be lightly moist. Don't just saturate this thing with fertilizer and water. It's not going to help. The fig tree is going to do what the fig tree wants to do. What drives all of that growth, the root growth and the top growth and all that, is genetics. It's either, this little fig tree knows what it wants to do inside. All you're doing with nutrients, you can't force it to grow faster than it's going to grow. All you can do is to give it what it needs, make it available so that it can choose to use it when it's time to use it. But in the meantime, the genetic code inside of this thing is going to tell it what it wants to do and when it wants to do it. Now, having said that, there are some parameters that you can use to help encourage it to grow, to give it those things it needs in order to grow to its fullest potential as quickly as possible. And in my opinion, one of those things, actually two of those things, are warmth and lighting. So right now, I've got this thing sitting on my windowsill. It's not doing anything. It's just it's stopped. It almost looks stunted. You go, what's wrong with my fig? It should be growing massive amounts of green growth and branching and figs growing off of it. And that's not necessarily true. It's just sitting in my windowsill with no real good source of lighting. It's got lighting, but no real good source and nothing artificial. So the skylight I've got is set off to the side a little bit. It's not getting much direct skylight, and it's really following the winter schedule outside. So we've got way less light in the sky through the day because the sun's way down on the horizon. I live in Washington State. So this thing right now, its little photo sensors in that leaf are sensing wintertime lighting. It is in a warmer house, but I don't have it in a real warm environment. It's like 68 degrees in there. It's not summertime conditions. So, maybe it just thinks it's dormant. I mean, what do they do over in Israel or over in the Mediterranean where a lot of these things are grown, right? What is winter to them over there? Probably, high 50s, low 60s, and maybe the lighting's down on the horizon a little bit. Maybe this thing thinks it's wintertime even though it's in my house. So what can we do? I think pretty soon I'm going to fire up my little indoor fluorescent tube bulb grow area. We're going to put this thing down under there with other plants, and we're going to just give it what it needs. We'll put the lights on a timer. We'll give it 16 hours of light a day. I've done 14 in the past, but I might up it to 16 hours of light a day. And just so you know, generally we get about 14 and a half hours of light a day in this region in the middle of summer. So 16 is excessive, but it might trigger it to think, hey, it is summertime. I gotta do something, man. And we'll just watch it. It'll be warmer under there. It'll have more light, and it will give this thing what it needs to use its genetics to its fullest potential. So there it is, guys. There's the answer to two questions that I see all the time on here, and some of them I get personally, and I thought I would just give it to you guys from my perspective. Now, having talked about figs here, I'm getting a little bit nostalgic because it's been a while since I've really done a good fig cutting video. Well, I did some fig cutting videos last summer, but I haven't really done a full run, man, because my main thing is these rhododendrons that you see behind me. But I've got a ton of figs out here and a ton of figs in here, and I need to whittle things down to just smaller, right? I'd like to somehow get rid of all these big potted figs and get them down to smaller pots and start over again, because I still haven't built that area where I want to plant these things out in an orchard. And in the meantime, it's getting tougher and tougher to manage all these big potted figs when I'm trying to deal with the rhododendrons. So I might start a project soon here. I haven't decided yet, but I've thought about going through and taking lots of cuttings off of all of these different varieties of figs and rooting all of them inside under the fluorescent tube lights. Would you guys want to see that? If you would, let me know about down below. I hope you enjoyed this one. I hope you guys learned something from it. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe if you want to follow along and see more fantastic fig videos. Have a fantastic week, and I'll see you in the next video. Adios!